Hola, my homies and goats. Well, it's been 2 months of making these YouTube videos, and I'm still technologically challenged as ever. Fortunately, I have a good friend who's quite a tech guru coming in about 3 weeks, and hopefully, he'll help me iron out some of the wrinkles. And I might even learn to edit a little bit, or at least be able to stop and restart a recording. But anyway, I want to kind of broach a subject that's really not something I want to, but I feel like I owe it to you, whoever you are. I said in my first video back in the 29th of October, and in fact, it was titled How Many Mistakes? And I made the statement that I haven't got all the answers, but I have made most, if not all, the mistakes. And I want to touch on one of the biggest of those mistakes tonight, and that is perennial anger. I was raised in an environment that was unstable. There was a lot of anger in the home I was raised in, violence, emotional chaos and destruction, uncertainty. One day the rules are tight, the next day they relax, and just not much stability, honestly. And there were times when there was a basis, a rational basis for fear, fear of physical violence. And I discovered, and of course, had some good examples at hand, but I discovered that anger was a pretty good tool. It sharpened my wits. It made me more situationally aware. It equipped me to read situations and people and the flow of a situation and see when it was going south, when it took the wrong fork in the road, and it gave me helped me acquire the capacity to outthink my adversaries. And I thought it was pretty good stuff. Of course, I discounted the reality and the fact that that very same anger, uh, especially when it was premature and hair triggered, got me into trouble at times. And by the time I got married and started a family of my own, I realized at some level that that chaos from which I had come was not normal, that it was excessive, and that it was not beneficial to me and my family. And so I kind of toned things down. And I thought I'd done a pretty good job of toning things down. There wasn't physical violence. There's never been physical violence in my family. Uh, Back in the days when my wife and I argued pretty loudly. You know, you didn't have to worry about whether or not I was being heard. I was heard. And unfortunately, as a parent, I, especially when I saw my kids making the same mistakes I did, I got pretty angry. And unfortunately, I was into my 40s or 50s before I realized that a big part of the problem was that I thought I was parenting me, not them. They were totally different people than I was, much more stable, much more um, just intuitive, balanced, intelligent, nurturing, giving. You know, they were just all the things that I didn't really have time or space to be when I was a little kid. And so my anger was unnecessary. And what I've discovered was that that same anger that just sometimes equipped me to be the man of the hour when the stuff hit the fan was a deal breaker. I've had employees that I really cared a lot for, and they cared for me, and we were friends until things would stack up on me, and that's kind of my modus operandi. I put up with, and I put up with, and I put up with, and things stack up, and eventually a single straw breaks the camel's back, and everybody can't figure out why I'm going off the deep end, why I'm blowing up over nothing. Usually it's almost a nothing that is the final straw that kind of pushes me over the edge. And unfortunately, people who have trusted you and relied on you and counted you as a friend, when you blow up at them in anger, things probably are never going to be the same. They may not write you off immediately, but you've built a wall that's going to be awful hard to um, tear back down. So part of the reason I'm making this is to tell you that this really is one of the biggest things in my life. You know, it doesn't seem, well, that's just a personality trait. No, it's not a personality trait. Anger is a choice. This thought hit me yesterday. There's a place in the book of Galatians that talks about one of the fruit of the Spirit, or part of the fruit of the Spirit, being gentleness. Gentleness is a choice. I can choose to be gentle. I didn't used to think I had a choice. I thought I just what I was, and I react to life because of who and what I am. Well, I'm sure there's a nature component to anger as well as a nurture, an environmental. But ultimately, you're responsible and we're accountable for the choices we make, and we can choose not to react. And I will tell you, those situations where I'm hurt that trigger anger, those situations where I'm disappointed that trigger anger, those situations where I feel like someone's been disingenuous and it triggers anger, those situations where I don't throw out my immediate instinctual guttural response, those situations tend to work out better in the long run. And so I want to urge you, dig in and find out where the places are where you've had a childhood trait that you've developed or were born with, or both. And for me, I would say it's probably both. But you had a tool, a defense mechanism, a defense strategy, a survival skill that you acquired in childhood that you brought with you into adulthood, but now it seems to be counterproductive. Yes, there are still times where my anger is kind of God used. The book of James says that the wrath of man doesn't work the righteousness of God. Somewhere in the book of Psalms, it might be in Psalm 86, it says that the wrath of man, God will use, and then he'll kind of dismiss the rest. The problem with even when we've got that righteous indignation, you throw a bomb, you have no idea how much collateral damage there's going to be. And so before we react to those negative, paralyzing emotions that are really the triggers for anger, anger seems to be empowering. It's empowering, but it's also destructive, just like a bomb is destructive. And again, you don't always know who all is going to be hit by that bomb. I can think of a situation a couple of years ago where I got angry at somebody because they were being physically threatening to myself and another person. And I, at one point while I was engaging this person who really needed to be dealt with sharply, and I had an angry visage. I wouldn't be a good poker player. You can read my emotions there on my face. And I glanced at this other person to see if they were okay, but just the countenance that I had, the expression I had in my face made them think I was angry with them. And it crushed them. And the fact was, I was just looking at them to check. But because of my history and because I had crushed them previously with my anger and many years ago, it opened up old wounds. So this particular weakness in me, this flaw in me, leads to some of my other things. I don't drink alcohol for a number of reasons. One of them being there's a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts in my family, and I want to be an example of something else. But the other thing is everything I've ever done in life, pretty much, I've done to excess. And in my teen years, early teen years, when I drank to excess intentionally. And so when there are things I don't do that makes you a good moral fellow. Well, maybe. But unfortunately, some of the things where I have strayed have been because of anger. And I'm looking for an escape. People who become addicted to other things, alcohol, gambling, sex, whatever it happens to be, drugs, sports, materialism. I hope I'm not stepping on your toes here much, but those things that we become obsessed with and become preoccupations, we turn to those things as escapes. And sometimes trying to escape the angry feelings, that's when I'm most vulnerable to temptation, whatever other temptations are in my life. And I've got some, but in reality, probably one of the two or three, if not the biggest challenges in my life is the fact that I adopted anger as a choice to respond to difficult and uncomfortable situations. And it's been terribly destructive. The good news is, and this doesn't, isn't that wonderful? This doesn't just wipe out the collateral damage that I've done because of my unjustifiable wrath and rage at times. The good news, though, is that Jesus, when he died on the cross, died for that dysfunction too, that moral failing, that sin. And, the cool thing is when you mess up and then you fess up, he seems to open doors. I did a video or two about that about a month ago. So anyway, as I've kind of become more aware and looked myself in the heart, not just the mirror, but deep into my heart, and the Holy Spirit has directed me to this major area of dysfunction, of corruption inside of me. As I've done that, God has opened doors. And the person who has probably been most crushed by my anger, one of my kids, just in the last couple of years has begun to somehow climb over the wall I built, or the wall they built, or the wall that was built to keep them safe. They've climbed over the wall and reached out, and we begun to connect again. And, it's going to take some time, but man, it's so good that rebuilding, that restoration process is in motion. I'm 66 years old. That's about a 44-year-old problem that really, again, in just the last couple of years, has begun to be resolved. I don't know what your thing is. I know we all have some deep-seated things that we bring dysfunctions from childhood that might have actually helped survival back then. I urge you to ask God to show you what's in your heart, show you the things that may have some practical use. There have been times, there have been situations where it was actually part of my job, not to act in uncontrolled rage, but to be able to bring the force that anger provides to a situation to deal with injustice. Just to be frank, there was a short period of time when I was involved in law enforcement. And cops shouldn't be walking around with a chip on their shoulder, but there are times when they need everything that I got out of anger when I was a little kid, and again on into adulthood. But you can't make that personal. You become judge and jury, and you pervert the very justice you're sworn to uphold. So again, to wrap things up, Jesus can show you the blind spots. He can take the things that you think can't be changed in you, and he can begin to work on them. I suspect that I'll have to close my eyes in death before all that's gone. But by his grace and by his kindness and by his work and by his forging and refining, and you refine with fire a lot of times, depending on what you're refining, but I'm getting there. And even some of the people who have had to throw up the shield because they were shocked by the power of my anger, God has torn down some of those shields, some of those walls. Glory to his name. I wish the same for you, but it starts with that fess up. We all mess up. We all need to fess up. And then he can begin to cleanse and to heal and to restore and to provide whatever is missing that is the counterpart. I mentioned gentleness. Gentleness is the counterpart to anger. And he's moving my heart in that direction. My heart's a lot more gentle than it used to be. There are still moments when the cranky old man comes out of me, unfortunately. I pray that this is a blessing to somebody. Whatever your hang up, your habit, your hurt is, I pray it's a blessing. And I know you can grow. If he can grow me, he can grow you. I wish you well.